As I have demonstrated in the past, if you hang around tank collections long enough, you never know who it is going to show up. So the National Armor and Cavalry Collection is having an open house here on Fort Moore, Georgia, where you can find all sorts of interesting, weird and wonderful vehicles such as T-29E3. And who should happen to walk in the door but Cone of Arc? So I'm going to do another episode of Chieftain randomly interviews somebody else from YouTube. All right, Cone, first question. Why Cone of Arc? Are you a mathematician or something?
So Cone of Arc was a name that I picked after my original name, which was Mr. Steve Gamer and Mr. Steve Crafter prior to that, because I'm terrible at naming things.
Your name
and
is
that's
Steve?
what. No, it never was. I put in my name as Steve Crafter in Google back when I was like 13 when I made my original Gmail account. And that was one of the ones that Google recommended to me was Mr. Steve Crafter. And I'm terrible at naming things. I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. About 5 or 6 years down the line, doesn't seem so cool anymore. So when I was kind of transitioning from War Thunder content into history content, I had started to kind of have a nickname for the FCM36, which was the Cone. And then as I like French vehicles quite a bit, the whole Joan of Arc thing. So it's a combination of the Cone, or Cone Head as we were calling it at that point, and Joan of Arc. So that's sort of where it came from. I kind of like the little bit of a history twist that the name had.
Fair enough. So you say you were transitioning. Would it be correct to say that that really hit with the Tonk video?
Yeah, I found the Tonk video was kind of the first thing that I did outside of War Thunder content that really hit it big. Because before that, I had just been doing gaming content and meme content. And that video did so well. It got over 1 million views in like a month or something like that.
That's
and it was
any of my videos.
It was a bit of a shock. And then I sort of realized, I'm like, I could do more things like this because I had been watching your content since I was in high school. And I was like, I really like this sort of thing. I like teaching people about history. I love learning about history. And if I can make money doing it, that's a win-win for me. So I started the Cursed by Design series, which was, I thought, a decent name, and it kind of breaks into things like the T-29E3, where they were maybe good designs, maybe not good designs, but somewhere along the way, there was something that cursed their development and caused them to not reach the battle, or when they did reach the battle, they weren't very good.
So what is your philosophy? So for me, my philosophy is I dig in the archives and I try to put out as little speculation as possible, and I come up with the why were the vehicles designed the way they were sort of attitude. Does your channel have a, I'm not going to say a mission statement, but a frame of reference that makes your channel different from anything else?
I guess a sort of mission statement that I have with my channel is I try to provide as unbiased information as I possibly can, because I see a lot of content out there where it's somebody talking about, maybe it's the T-34, maybe it's the Sherman, and it's either the best vehicle ever or it's the worst vehicle ever and it never should have been made. And I feel like the truth is always in the middle of that. Was the T-34 the best tank ever made? No. Was it the best tank the Soviets had at that point? It might have been for them because they needed a tank that was reliable, cheap to produce, and they had the facilities to produce it, and the T-34 met that requirement. It's a good vehicle for them, but was it a good vehicle for the United States? No, the Sherman would have been the good vehicle for the United States. So that's sort of the thing I go for, and I try to use the information I can find, whether it's archives, books that you can trust, because there's some books out there that are less trustworthy, and any sort of other resources I have at my disposal. I'm actually going to do a video on that in the future, how I do my research. And I try to provide an unbiased look at the history of a vehicle, the pros and cons of it. Even if it was a bad design, they might still have some pros to it. And that's sort of what I aim for.
Are you getting there? Are you achieving it?
I feel like I am. I feel like my more recent videos, the Firefly video that I made, is probably one of the ones I am the most proud of, because I feel like I really went through and I showed a vehicle that you've showed in the past, but you didn't go too heavily into the development and all of that sort of stuff. And I was able to find records from the Canadian archive and some from the British archive and really piece together sort of, why did the British build this? Was it actually as bad as people say it was? And sort of the whole meme of like, oh, it was just a cobbled together. No, it was actually it was intended, or Okay, let me try this again. They built it for a very specific purpose, and they did it much better than people give them credit for.
What would you say? Let me try to put this in a slightly different way. Okay, so I have a relatively dry delivery. So I'm old. I'm boring. So I'm going to sit there. I'm going to read the test reports per se, and you have a slightly more. I'm not quite sure what is the right word, but I don't have anime characters, for example, on my channel. I tend to use a little bit less direct humor. So why did you decide to start doing that?
Well, honestly, the way that I look at it with the character, at least, is I've always seen, you see all these big brands, whether it be McDonald's, Wendy's, any of those, and they have a mascot. And I feel like a mascot and good branding for a channel is not, I wouldn't say more important than the content of the channel, because obviously if you have crap content, it doesn't mean anything. But having that sort of marketable character that people will instantly recognize and say, oh, that's Joan of Arc, I know that character. I feel like it really helps to not just connect me to my audience, but it also sort of introduces the historical subjects that I cover in a more simplified way and in a way that's more digestible for people. And that's something that I aim for, because obviously I could go full in depth like you do in your videos, and you do an amazing job at that. But there is also a market for people who are maybe not as interested in history, or maybe they don't have the full understanding yet to the level that your content sort of requires sometimes.
Well, it's obviously an area that needs feeding, because your channel's larger than my channel now.
I'm trying very hard.
The student has become the master.
I'm trying very hard to introduce to that sort of, whether it be younger people or older people who don't have a lot of experience with the subject, whether they be War Thunder, World of Tanks players, any of those games, and they know the vehicles maybe, but they don't really know the history behind them, and there's a lot of misconceptions out there. So I try to aim for that simple but educational sort of content. That way I can kind of feed people up the chain to content like yours or other people who do more detailed stuff.
Okay, so you have come many miles from your home of record to Fort Moore. What are you looking to see here?
I was mainly coming to see things like the T-Series heavy tanks, as we have behind us, as well as the T-28 Super Heavy. Honestly, I just wanted to see the whole collection, because I'm very much a nerd about this sort of thing, as I would assume you all can tell. But yeah, the main ones that I'm looking for are the American heavy tanks, because it's something that Honeycutt did a really good job covering them in his books, but I haven't seen anyone cover them on YouTube, and I'm hoping that I can do that in a good way that kind of teaches people more about these largely forgotten heavy tanks. I mean, you might know them from games, but people don't really know much about them.
That's kind of the weird thing. There's a strange crossover now between games, and other industries and real history are benefiting from the games. So
yeah.
A lot of people didn't realize that America had a heavy tank program, starting with the M6 and through the war, because it didn't show up in the movies. It wasn't in the popular culture books. Yeah, if you had a copy of Firepower, but 10 years ago, how much did a copy of Firepower set you back? It was like $400 for a book.
It's still like an $80 book or something like that.
Well, it's relative. My book is $60, but okay.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, especially after World of Tanks came out, because it was the first one, when I was working at the museum that I was at in California, so all of a sudden you could tell there was a change in the audience. The people, they were asking questions that they didn't used to ask, or about vehicles that they didn't used to ask about. And then you go to the modeling companies. Now, all of a sudden, after World of Tanks came out, the M103 heavy tank came out in injection mold. The T-28. I have an accurate armor T-28. It was a resin kit, $200. And now you can get an injection molded, I think it's from Dragon, for, say, $80, whatever, a lot less. The 200 was several years ago, I should add, about a decade ago. I still haven't built the damn thing. I'm actually building it. I'm spending too much time doing this. So I think there is actually, that forgotten side does need a little bit better feeding, but it's not as forgotten as it used to be.
No, definitely not. And I hope that my content has sort of been one of the driving factors behind that, because I feel like I've covered a lot of vehicles that in my comment section people will mention they've never heard of them before, whether it be something like the Super Hellcat, or some of the even more bizarre ones like the, I can't remember the name of it, but the one that they built in Mexico with the revolving Hotchkiss cannon. There's places out there like Tanks Encyclopedia, which are great, who cover these things, but you don't get the full audience that you can reach on YouTube. And once somebody learns about that, it gives them the opportunity to go and learn more about that. And that's what I want
The
people
related one
to
that
do.
gets me is you take a selfie in front of the T-28 or something, and somebody's going to pop up, what, they actually really built it? It wasn't made up?
Yeah.
So, yes, they really built it. All right, so you're going to be actually making some content while you're here?
Yeah, I'm planning this whole trip that I did down here and then back up north is going to be a whole video which will be coming out. I'm not exactly sure when, probably within a month or two of getting back.
The travels and tribulations of Joan of Arc.
Yeah, it's been interesting, that's for sure. It was an interesting journey.
All right, well, I'm going to cut it short because I have to catch an airplane to go back up to Atlanta. And
Yep.
you have a live fire to go to.
Yes, I do.
So at the end of the live fire, we'll send you to the recruiter and you're going to become an Abrams tanker.
We'll see about that.
No? No?
I like the civilian aspect.
Not having to get up at 5:30 for a fitness test in the rain probably does,
Yeah.
it does have some appeal.
I'm not a morning person, so I don't know if that would work for me.
All right, well, good talking to you. And in the unlikely event that you don't know Joan of Arc's channel, A, it comes up really, really easily if you go to YouTube search and type Joan of Arc. Or B, I'll put a link down below. All right, well, thanks for the chat.
Yeah, thank
Take
you
care.
for having me.